Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Nitin Jadhav, and along with my co-host Sakshi Patil, we welcome you all for the second session of today. It's with immense pleasure that we extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guest speaker for the Ambedkar Intellectual Summit 2024, Dr. Komal Razak. As we gather to commemorate the 133rd birth anniversary of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, we are honored to have Dr. Rajak with us for an insightful session. In our session today, Dr. Rajak will delve into the topic of Babasaheb Ambedkar, Hindu Code Bill, and women liberation. Through her expertise and deep understanding, she will shed light on the profound impact of Dr. Ambedkar's vision, particularly concerning women's liberation and the Hindu Code Bill. This talk is live via Zoom, offering us the opportunity to engage with Dr. Rajak's valuable insights. Additionally, for those unable to join via Zoom, the session will be streamed live on the Ambedkar Caravan Facebook channel as well. So let's come together to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and gain invaluable knowledge from Dr. Komal Rajak's expertise. Our guest lecturer, Dr. Komal Rajak, let me just introduce or give some introduction about her. She is a highly respected scholar in the field of political science with a strong focus on issues related to caste, gender, and social justice. Holding a PhD from University of Delhi, Dr. Rajak has dedicated her academic career to exploring the complexities of Hindu women's property rights in India, among other pertinent topics. With a rich background in research and teaching, Dr. Rajak brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our summit. Her work as a postdoctoral research associate at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research at Mohali, along with her involvement in various projects examining gender equity and the socio-political implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, reflects her commitment to addressing contemporary challenges through rigorous scholarship. Dr. Rajak's contributions extend beyond academia, as evidenced by her participation in international conferences, workshops, and voluntary services aimed at promoting social harmony and justice. We are privileged today to have her join us as a guest lecturer for this Ambedkar Intellectual Summit 2024, where her expertise will undoubtedly enrich our discussions and deepen our understanding of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's legacy. We look forward to your active participation in this enriching event. Over to Dr. Komal Rachak.
Jabin sir, and thank you so much for providing me an opportunity to speak on like celebrating Baba Saheb's Jayanti and speaking on his contribution in regards to women's empowerment and women's rights in India. So today I will be speaking on Babasaheb Ambedkar, his contribution and his relevance in women's rights movement in India, and I will be focusing more on Hindu Code Bill, since Hindu Code Bill is a document of rights for women in India. And then I will be like mentioning some of the major provisions of Hindu Code Bill and how revolutionary they are. So when we think of women, women as a category is considered an absolute. Women as category is considered as subordinate to men throughout the ancient Hindu law statute. Women's own agency had discarded, and she had made dependent upon and controlled by male relatives and like larger society as well, for her basic requirements and her financial needs as well. In the process, in ancient law codes like Arthashastra, well, I will be considering the Arthashastra, Manusmriti, and some like references for the other Dharma Shastras to contextualize Hindu women's position in general, and how like women are denied from their fundamental rights. While on the other hand, as an ideology of rights, ideology of women's rights, Hindu Code Bill, on the other hand, puts the end of gender discrimination and grants women entitlements. So the Hindu Code Bill paved the way to remove graded inequality. We have we have seen that how Hindu Code Bill address the question of graded inequality in Hindu social order, particularly by offering the hypothesis that men and women both should be treated equally for a society to progress. Evidences show that the women who do not own any asset or who do not own any rights are subject to threats of violence and other inequalities within the household and in the larger society as well. Indian constitution guarantees equality to all the citizens irrespective of their sex, caste, religion, region, etc. Denial of the right to inherit ancestral property goes against women's rights as citizen and against the principle of gender egalitarianism, which has been conserved in the constitution, wherein Ambedkar laid down the foundation of social justice and gender justice. And without gender equality, social justice cannot be achieved. From this egalitarian perspective, women's inheritance rights is the subject of much scrutiny and investigation. To understand this, the dichotomy of tradition and modernity uh, would be addressed in this attempt. So the if we see the current Hindu legal system, which has evolved through diverse stages of development, starting from the Shastric Hindu laws, the Anglo Hindu law, and to the establishment of the modern legal system, which has a like sacred nature, different nature. It governs the various social aspects of Hindu life, such as marriage and divorce, adoption, inheritance, minority and guardianship, family matters, etc. The modern Hindu law is expanded to several other religious communities, those who were practicing the Hindu customs in their everyday life, such as Jain, Buddhist, and Sikhs. The Hindu Code Bill has a wide historical dimension of challenging and changing the dominant historical discourse over the last 2000 years. It defies the privileges of
There's some network issue, Dr. Rajak. It seems we are not able to hear you clearly. Could you just check the network, please, once? Your voice was breaking for some time. Maybe you could try again. Let's try again once. Just give us a few minutes, some technical issue here. We are just checking the network issue at Dr. Rajak's place. Yeah, there's a suggestion to turn off the video. Maybe you could do that and, could speak probably. Just try that if that helps. Seems there's a network challenge. We are just getting through it. While she joins, just a suggestion in case you have any questions, you could, probably note it down and we can take it when she's back and at the end of the session. Um, I'm not able to get through her phone as well. Seems there is a network issue. So just give us a few minutes. Okay, I could just speak to the speaker. There was some technical issue at a place. She's joining now in a minute. Things we cannot control. So I think we have our speaker back online. Dr. Razak, you're there? Yeah, Dr. Razak, maybe you can unmute and continue. Admin, can you check if she's able to unmute herself? Can you please check? Yeah. Dr. Rajak?
Yes, sir. I'm
Yeah, great.
here.
Okay,
So
good.
Hindu code will define the Hindu privileges of system rights for the majority, including untouchables and women. It confronts the Hindu philosophy that proper inequality. If we see philosophically, Hindu code debates and subsequent legislations talk about the significance of the state over the authority of religious books in matters of divorce, property ownership, inheritance, option, maintenance, etc. Ambedkar signifies caste as a silent feature in denial of rights to women. The ruling caste, who are benefited from the hierarchical social order, opposed Hindu code bill fervidly, realizing their privileges of suppressing and denying rights at verge of paste. Hindu code bill considered as a document of rights, historical overview of women's rights discourse in India. This work takes on the Shastric text as thesis, the Hindu bill as antithesis, and the consequent legislations passed later on, like Hindu Succession Act 1956 and then Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005. Antithesis in in Hindu code will contribute in the process of equalizing the power relations in terms of sex and caste. The ambience of women's rights. So, women's rights have not started with Hindu code bill, but it was in process. Code bill was of that process. So, women's rights started since British period, when the Hindu Women's Right to Property Act 1937 was enacted by the Indian legislature, which granted Hindu widows right to claim a share in their husband's property and to stipulate for partition of his undivided family estate. However, it was executed when issues were raging, then considered British government decided to examine the case, which a committee chairmanship of B.N. Rao was appointed. They recommended the compulsory repair of Hindu law till and which because of it was not like in uniformity, it was creating contradictions. Committee sketched up two bills. One was the Hindu marriage bill, and the second was the intestate succession bill, which were introduced central legislature in 1943, but were eventually descended because of and again in 1944 it was restructured into a draft code, and this time it is named as Hindu code bill, dealing specifically with the cases of succession, maintenance, marriage and divorce, minority and guardianship, etc. And this time again it was not acted upon. So subsequent independence, it was reintroduced by the government of India in the Constituent Assembly on April 11th, 1947. This time uh, it was introduced by Dr. Ambedkar, the law minister of independent India. Ambedkar's major concern for women's status has been reflected in this bill, as Ambedkar explained in the Constituent Assembly that the bill was to codify and modify the Hindu law, and also Ambedkar added previous bill prepared by B.N. Rao and added certain new provisions. So the bill was according to Austin to invalidate the Hindu personal law, as through these women were subjugated. The bill was an immense exodus from Hinduism, and it degrading sets of laws regarding gender. As in Hinduism, there were two laws in regards of inheritance, marriage, adoption, these two laws were Mitakshara and Daya Bhaga. If we see Mitakshara law, property of a man is not an individual property, whereas it belongs to co-personary or shared ownership of male lineage. In other words, like it is in like generations of male lineage, father, son, grandson, and great grandson, and they get it both only. While in Daya Bhaga, ownership of property has its individual character. That is to anyone who inherits property from their elders or parents, uh, it has absolute right over that property. So this trend, like individual aspect of it, was adopted in the Hindu Code Bill by Ambedkar and to make a common law by modifying it according to the modern day. Since in Daya Bhaga, there was a discrimination among female heirs on the basis of their status of being or not being married, having children or not having children. This line of discrimination proposed to wipe out through the Hindu Code Bill, wherein Ambedkar placed the widow of a predeceased son on the equal standing. In order to restore equity of gender, daughter's share as equal to son was prescribed in her father's as in her husband's property, and she was made as equal here as to the son. Widow of predeceased son, the son of predeceased son of predeceased son, and for widow and predeceased son of the predeceased son, means in four generation, gender discrimination was removed to in a co-personary inheritance. Moreover, Ambedkar brought an absolute equality between son and daughter by making a provision of son's share in his mother's property, as Ambedkar held that son also would get a share as equal to daughter's share in mother's property, even in Istri. Thus, all heirs had been faced at equal and balanced ground. Through the bill, women were proposed to grant absolute right regarding all property, not merely Stridhana. And as in Daya Bhaga law, women entitled the life estate rights, the property which she can enjoy barely during her lifetime, but cannot set property off in any condition. Whereas after her death, the same property would go to her husband's heirs. Ambedkar had altered this partial estate into an absolute one. Furthermore, it was also propounded in Hindu Code Bill that whatever property women acquire, uh, women acquire after the enactment of the bill will be her absolute property. So another, so she would be having that ownership also, or the element of ownership. Uh, Whatever she would be earning for earning. So another sacrosanct arrangement in regards to women's property rights was that an adopted son will not dispose from the property she received from her deceased husband prior adopted son. Hence, after sanctioning the bill, the adopted son would not be in position to mother utterly from her property, and by this way, widow's position was strengthened. Ambedkar also reckoned in the bill that the dowry which is given to daughters at her which is given at daughter's marriage must be treated as trust property by her in-laws, not as their own property, and like that. So, and this is regarding the property and her self-acquired property and inheritance. And when it comes to the marriage, two new clauses, restitution of the conjugal rights and the judicial separation, had been added by the select committee when Ambedkar introduced the Hindu Code Bill. These 2 points were not in the original bill prepared by B.N. Rao committee. Prior to the bill, only the sacramental marriage was in practice under Daya Bhaga rule, wherein no space for a non-religious person. Hindu code will commence two types of marriage: a civil marriage and non-civil marriage, which is sacramental. In civil marriage, uh, in civil marriage, person gets a high level of personal freedom, as divorce was made easier. The divorcement of the civil marriage was introduced for the first time from women's outlook, if we see, in the proposed bill, on the grounds of impotency, adultery, leprosy, either of the married couple being lunatic or idiotic, and where the marriage was completed by force and without the consent of guardian. Although sacramental marriage was made indissoluble in the bill, but a sacramental marriage could also be declared invalid on the grounds beside above mentioned, like conversion, if conversion, not resuming intercourse for 2 years after an order for judicial separation, and failing to comply for 2 years with the decree of restitution of conjugal rights. Furthermore, if we see, to restore the women's dignity as a human being in the society, Ambedkar prohibited the polygamy and prescribed the monogamy. Hindu Code Bill also obliterates the caste principle regarding marriage and adoption of child. It is quite evident from this illustration of the principal features of the Hindu Code Bill that Ambedkar reframed the bill with his passion to the values of equality, liberty, fraternity, and dignity. The seamless entanglement of overture of women's absolute share in property, purge of caste restrictions in matters of marriage and adoption, elimination of polygamy, and overture of monogamy would restore the values of social democracy. As a consequence, Hindu Code Bill was for refurbishing the society on the sex-neutral ideas, as Ambedkar himself called it, as for structural repair of the society, and to remove the superiority and inferiority based relations, because patriarchal culture in India is based upon such dictums evident through the Manusmriti in Hinduism and some other religious texts as well, which I'm not taking into consideration right now. The Hindu code will challenge this base itself and awarded women the equal position as of men. Hence, the bill was against the structure of domination and suppression of women, and by way of this, challenge the very philosophy of Hinduism, which is based on graded inequality. However, the bill could not be conceded but withdrawn, not only because of antagonism from the Hindu orthodoxy, particularly from Hindu Mahasabha and Bharatiya Jansangh, but also due to the dishonesty of then Prime Minister Nehru towards the bill. The Hindu Mahasabha opposed the bill in order to prevent any legislative interference in their religious matters, and it has been stated that it is against the Indian culture, as it provides the options of divorce and monogamy, which may prevent a man to have sons, which is sacrosanct for salvation in Hinduism. Even the president, Rajendra Prasad, opposed the bill by saying that the same principles, like it intervenes in Hindus' personal law and would satisfy a few purported progressive people. Such religious, conservative, and patriarchal social elements of the society had condemned the bill's provisions for women's rights, monogamy, and divorce. These three principal major points on which Hindu Code Bill was opposed vehemently, because it was like considered by them as an ultra modern invasion in Hindu religious activities. On the other than that, Ambedkar's status of being a non-congressman had made it more difficult for him to proceed further. It is evident from the treatment Hindu Code Bill got in the legislative assembly, that since Ambedkar was a non-congressman, the mind has been made up already not to let it be passed. Since very less time was given to discussions on the bill in subsequent years, and in September 1951, when it was put on agenda at the last session, dropped after only 4 clauses were considered, which Ambedkar explained in his resignation letter. In October 1951, Nehru did withdraw the entire bill because he realized the electoral repercussions of the bill, since dominant majority was against the bill. According to like Nehru, it was the great anguish to Ambedkar, and he resigned from the cabinet in September 1951, and he wrote to Nehru that there was no reason to continue as law minister. In a press note, Ambedkar made a statement that Nehru had not earnestness and determination to get the bill passed because he never used the whip in parliament to prevent everlasting speeches of opponents, so that filibustering could be avoided and the provisions passed, which went in opponents' favor. However, the bill was supported by many women organizations such as All India Women's Congress and women leaders like Renuka Ray, G. Durga Bai, and Hansa Mehta. Ambedkar was a great protagonist of Hindu Code Bill, and it seems evident that the anti-Ambedkar indoctrination among opponents made the enforcement of bill fail. As it is evident from the statement of J.R. Shastri, who said that Ganges water from a gutter cannot be considered holy. Some members openly declared that as long as Dr. Ambedkar was piloting the bill, they would not allow it to pass. It is apparent from the fact that in 1955 and 56, when Ambedkar was not associated with it anymore, the bill was enacted as in split manner into like it was splitted in 4 separate bills acts, such as Hindu Marriage Act 1955, Hindu Succession Act 1956, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act 1956, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act 1956. So, in enacting the Hindu Code Bill, Ambedkar derived his ideal from the Constitution of India, which propelled for the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Ambedkar stated that the institution of marriage under Hinduism is totally against the ideal of equality, since it is for continuous or everlasting slavery for women, because a woman cannot be free from her husband in any condition. The bill was a kind of equalizer and en route for making a society where men and women both will be equal. Through the bill, Ambedkar had sought to destroy the anti-women codes of Manusmriti and of Hinduism. His resignation was a protest against the suspension of the egalitarian establishment of a society. It was an example of supreme sacrifice for women's liberation, which was women's liberation in not only in India but in world history of women's rights movement. Although Ambedkar could not succeed in getting the full Hindu Code Bill passed, he successfully put the brick of foundation of equality for the women in India in all spheres of life. Women can now have rights, at least in legal domain, have rights to custody of child, provision of alimony, uh, like maintenance allowance from husband on getting legally separated. Widow can now adopt a child, possess rights over parental property, and marry many more rights. Later reforms, namely property rights for daughters and women's reservation in legislature, are certainly the results of discourse Hindu Code Bill initiated. When we look at the feminist reading of Ambedkar, which is more relevant in today's context, when the patriarchal forces derived from their respective religious ideologies, weakening the egalitarian urge. Hence, to examine Ambedkar's thought of women's liberation becomes relevant. Ambedkar was in at large, if we see, Ambedkar favors the state socialism, wherein his notion of socialism is based on the principle of justice and rights. For Ambedkar, the social theory of Vedanta is an antithesis of socialism because it stands for social equality and human brotherhood, whereas the Varna system creates social inequality not in terms of gender but in terms of Varna order and caste order also. So yeah, this is from my side, but and I'm stopping here, and rest of the points I will address in question answer session. Thank you.
A great session, Dr. Rajak. By any chance, if you could try switching on your camera, it would help. Let's check if the network stays. You have been speaking so well, beautiful coverage of the whole topic. And we saw some messages that people were not able to see the speaker. So thank you. Let's hope that the connection stays good. The forum is open for questions in case you have. It was such a nice discourse, I would say, of various topics related to the Hindu code bill and the women liberalization. Uh, 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 I would say the areas covers are deep. If you have any questions, please uh, you can put it in the chat or maybe raise your hand and the admin can unmute you. I see there are two questions. Admin, could you just unmute them serially? We have
I think they can unmute themselves.
Okay, Arif, maybe you can take it. Yeah, you can take the first question.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir. And thanks a lot to our guest speaker for the kind of, enlightening lecture. My question will be very precise in the social domain of the implementation of various laws. Legal domain, we tried a lot, as ma'am said, as our guest speaker said, that there were various hurdles, but in any way, it was passed by the by then Parliament in 55 to 56. Sir, ignorance of law is the biggest obstacle in its implementation. And as I am working in the revenue field here in Jammu and Kashmir state, also I'm running a study group by the name of Lyceum, wherein I got the data that in landed property, especially in landed property, from personal law perspective, most of the rights which are given to the women are not implemented. So in that way, what to do as academician, as social scientist, as researcher, what shall be the task of ours? And second, if you allow me, second related question, ma'am, was that the only ancestral property wherein the rights were given, or to the acquired property also? And also kindly enlighten us with the amendment which was brought in the year, I think, I may be wrong, in the year 2005 in the Hindu Code Bill. Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, good question. Dr. Rajak, would you like to just take it up?
Yeah, yes, I will be addressing this question now. So yeah, when it comes to the landed property, Hindu Code Bill talks about women's property rights in all sort of lands. It does not make any distinction between landed property or non-landed property. But like in if we see theoretically and if we see in legal domain, women are on equal footing as of men of their family. But when we see in practice, it is not executed properly. There are for that for this non-execution, there are like we can observe certain regions. For like one can be the legal illiteracy among the people. They do not know whether women are granted rights or not legally. And secondly, when they know, there is there is a sort of socialization which is patriarchal and religious, wherein women are taught not to claim for their rights. And not on it is like in general also, and when it comes to property, it is more serious. more seriously implemented in that way, that women should not ask or should not claim for their right. And there are cases when daughters have asked their rights and they were stigmatized in like they are stigmatized not as bad women or not good women, like that. So the
So the question was also about ancestral
Yes, yes,
versus
yes.
acquired property. So I believe you'll be taking that.
Yeah. So not only that, like my point is that what can be done in this regard, not only that, not only making laws is like important, but its execution and making people aware of rights, and making women aware more than women, making men aware of women's rights is important. And this socialization should be like should also be reversed at larger level. And when it comes to like in regards to the question of ancestral or self-acquired property, uh, according to the law, not only ancestral property, but in self-acquired and self-acquired property also, women were granted rights. And other than that also, whatever women is earning by herself, she would be having that absolute right over that property. So I was like majorly addressing the ancestral property because in India, or we can say like in South Asia, larger property or this property is in individual control, and which is like generation by generation, and which is largely inherited on patrilineal grounds. So that is why I was focusing more on ancestral property. But when it comes to other way of acquiring property, Hindu code bill addresses all the properties, and the subsequent acts as well, especially this Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005 address all these points, and it includes women in co-partnership rights, co-partnership property as well, which was not taken into consideration in 1956, while Ambedkar endorsed that point in Hindu Code Bill.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Next would be RK. You have raised your hand. Can you please unmute yourself and ask the question, please?
Good evening. My question is a little different. It is in the perspective of legislations coming into force from 1955 onwards, and before that Hindu code bill being introduced in the parliament. But despite that, the struggle and the works of Babasaheb Ambedkar starts from 1970 onwards, when the first paper he publishes and presents in Columbia University, and till he resigns as a law minister in Government of India. So, in all his works, whether it is annihilation of caste, whether it is rise and fall of Hindu women, whether it is what Congress and Gandhi have done, whether it is thoughts on Pakistan or partition of India, this aspect he has touched upon more or less to certain extent, and ultimately the Hindu code bill was tabled by him. Now, the women in Hindu society who have been great beneficiary of all these legislation, they still are unaware of the contribution and the dedicated work which Babasaheb Ambedkar has actually put into place whole his life to uphold their rights and privileges through legal as well as through social reforms. So upper caste Hindu women are still bogged down in that belief system, in that cultural, spiritual, and religious system, where they are unable to find out that who is their benefactor and who is their opponent. So therefore, in 21st century, second decade, a prime minister of a country like India has to declare that beti bachao, beti padhao. So 21st century, second decade also is the problem, which was there earlier, despite all these reforms. And in case a society is engulfed in this kind of, belief system, where the women are unable to decipher that who is their benefactor and who is their opponent, and they themselves are unable to wage a war for their rightful place as a dignified person living in society, then I think the work or the law which are enacted through the legislature in a democracy may not bring the desired result. I'm not saying the laws are not important. Laws are very, very important. They still and they uphold the right of individuals. But much broader social reform needs to take place in the whole system if women has to attain its dignity, and India has to become a very powerful nation in the country. So my question is that women in Indian society in today's context in 21st century are still bogged down with the traditional belief system, which put a stopple on them to think that who is their benefactor and who are their opponent. How do you respond to this kind of situation?
Thank you for the question, sir. I totally agree with the situation you have underlined. But sir, in my work, I have not presented that here. I constantly highlight the point that one should know the difference between the ideology of denial of rights and the ideology of giving rights or granting rights. Whereas in our context, like in Hindu social order or like Indian context, since caste is the hierarchical structure, so women are not women only, they belong to a caste, and a caste in caste system, like they know where they are located, and if they are in the on the privileged grounds, so obviously that caste mentality and the caste ideology will not allow them to take the name of Ambedkar. Like, since we all uh, informed about the case that till 1990s, until some untouchable women in academia started questioning the feminism. The feminism was like addressing their questions only, and Ambedkar, forget about Ambedkar, Hindu code bill was not in the discussion of feminist writings and feminist discourses in India. And like my today's presentation, I have mentioned that anti-Ambedkar standpoint, and like Ambedkar's location, where he is coming from. These were the points why the Hindu code bill was not getting passed until his association with the bill. So these things are there, and again, like we have that ideology, like that sort of uh, attitude, social attitude we are having, or the psyche, we can say that people in general do not look where something is coming from. For example, rights are there, so there is accommodative behavior. Like there are women from particular strata, or in general also, that they will not go in detail, or they will not look at like they will not be able to differentiate between the ideology of rights and ideology of their denial of rights. So they will be like on the one hand, they will be following the discriminatory practices, or for example, caste system, or they will be following the patriarchal practices as well, whether it is Karwa Chauth or whether it is Mangal Sutra or other things. And on the other hand, if there are certain rights about like right to property, and right to education, and also they would be accommodative about these rights, but they would not be they would not be questioning the existing systems or existing practices. So this kind of contradictions are there. and like what can be done in this regard. So constantly, like one should highlight and one should underline the difference between where certain rights are coming and where from where the ideology of denial of rights is deriving. For example, like uh, in uh, in in his writings and speeches, Ambedkar mentioned of this uh, where these sort of discriminatory principles are deriving their force, which are like Hindu Shastra and all. So this thing constantly be questioned, and it should be challenged, and it should be highlighted, and two things should not cannot go along, but in India, like contradict. This is the irony of Indian feminist discourse, that they are able to take both to like carry both the things together. So, and like if you see Indian feminist scholars like Kamla Bhasin and some other scholars who are saying that they will be celebrating, they will be enjoying this feminist discourse and feminist movement, or like claiming on those grounds, and on the other hand they are claiming that they will be celebrating Bhai Dooj, and they are naming that as Behan Dooj or something like that. So this is the contradiction and irony of feminist discourse in India, and this is why like I argue for that. That in the feminism in India, or feminist discourse at large in India, compromising with the feminist ideology and feminist principles, because because they are protecting their caste privileges. They don't want their caste privileges to be questioned. And considering Ambedkar, like in Ambedkar's work and Ambedkar's name would be like it's a bigger thing. Like when Ambedkar is there, Ambedkar's work would be there, and if Ambedkar's work is there, their caste privileges would under question, which they don't want. So that is my understanding on this question you have asked.
Thank you very much.
Great. Actually, the question was also profound and the answer was also pretty much, profound. So thank you for this, good discussion. We have two questions. I think one is on Facebook and one on the chat. I'll take the shorter one. Which books can share more insight on this topic is what is being asked on Facebook. So do you have any short answer on that, Dr. Razak?
I'm
Razak?
sorry, sir, what was the question?
So the question is, which books can share more insight on this topic? What literature or other books can people refer?
So on Hindu Code Bill, there is only one book published by Chitra Sinha, which is on debating patriarchy, a reading of Hindu Code Bill, or like trajectory of Hindu Code Bill. So that is the only book which is like authored by Chitra Sinha, and which talks debates. So and to understand it at large, I would suggest the Hindu Code Bill itself. So there are two volumes of Hindu Code Bill, like Ambedkar's writings and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar writing and speeches. So that these two books only I can suggest as of now, because there is no work on Hindu Code Bill. So, and then there is one question in the chat
In the
section
chat, yeah.
also.
Yeah. I'll just read it out for the convenience of others. So the question is from Mr. Anshul Kumar, and it says, how do you see Hindu Code Bill governing all Indic religions, be it Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, as all are governed under the Hindu Marriage Act? In regard to Buddhism, why is there no separate personal law in Buddhism?
So yeah, like when we see Hindu code, like why Hindu Code Bill implies on all these Indic laws, we like I also came across the same argument, and in my reading also, because not because including them in Hinduism, but these religions also practice Hindu practices itself. So, but why there is no separate personal law in Buddhism? When we see like Buddhist ideology, it is more about it is more about secular ideology. Maybe that is the only point I could say as of now, as like since like I'm working on that idea. I have not found answers for this question, but this is very much grappling question in like contemporary times, since like considering the Hindu politics and all, and constantly all this Ambedkar circle talks about Buddhism as a religious alternate, but yeah, that I I have no answer for this question right now. But yeah, there is like why there is no separate personal law in Buddhism, uh, because my as as per my understanding, Buddhism like considering all these principles, there is no principle on how land and how the property would be how the property would be devolved, and how the marriages would be happening. So yeah, I would just say that Buddhism in terms of uh, ordering the society, or considering the law and order of the society, Buddhism does not talk about it, and it just like provide that it just talks about more into spiritual things rather than considering the societal major concerns of the society. I don't know. I do not know. Like I myself is struggling with addressing this question, and I have not found answers, and I have not found any literature also on that. So I'm really very sorry, Anshul, for your like this question, and I have no answer for this right now.
No, maybe a good question.
Maybe we can discuss it on this when we will meet, or
Sure. No, so thank you. Anyways, if there are no answers, maybe we can, that gives us a good point to think over for the whole, community as such. There is another, I don't know whether there's a question, but there's a suggestion by, and sorry, I'm not able to pronounce that name correctly, but maybe I'll say Anbazagan, where it's mentioned that RK's question is very important one. The focus now must fall upon those left behind and standing last in the queue. A shift is required. Strengthening the implementation of 73 and 74 amendment may be one of the ways. So, we are just at the top of the hour. It's 9:30. So in case you have any points on that, Dr. Razak, you can speak, in case you have any thought on that.
Yeah, like focusing on 73rd and 74th amendment may be important, and yeah, that's important, but my focus is not on my focus is not on those who were left behind. My focus is on who are controlling the major portion of the property or resources in the country, and I am studying those from the Ambedkar lens, and from the lens I am understanding from Ambedkar's writings and speeches, like how the property is being managed among the circles who are controlling the major portions of the resources, whether it is landed property and other aspects of other resources, natural resources, and other aspects of the property. So I believe understanding them and understanding their psyche and how it works, and how inheritance happens among them, how the question of inheritance addressed, and how gender bias it is there, and how these laws are enacted or executed among those communities, rather than forcing rather than discussing the ones who are not having the inheritable land. So my focus is not on the ones who are left behind, but the ones who are controlling the major portions of the property in India. But that can be good way of like the way you are mentioning that, and I believe that 73rd and 74th amendment are important to be discussed, but I'm not focusing on that.
Great. I think it was an insightful, session. Great, I would, points covered, and very good questions from the audience as well. And I'm sure there were more questions. We are limited by time, and there could be more. But thank you so much for your time, Dr. Rajak. The depth of knowledge that you have, the challenges, and the way the overall, act was implemented, and the rights. Like, I have a daughter, and I know how important this is for her, right? So it's so simple, but probably they wouldn't know how it came into existence. What were the challenges earlier, and the good days that they see now. Probably nobody would know the history around it, nor are they concerned. But this was such an insightful, information from you. So thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with all of us. I think with
Thank
that,
you so much, sir.
sorry, if you have anything, maybe you can speak, or we can conclude the session.
Yes, sir, my point was just that knowing from where something is coming from is as important as the execution of the law. So this is our point, and this is like from our perspective we constantly argue, and this is important to understand and to differentiate between two things. Like, one is not giving you right, or in fact snatching your right, and other ideology is granting you rights or entitling you with rights. So this is important, but the actual execution is also important. Like, uh, uh, it is kind of parallel thing, one this should be uh, campaigned also, but on the other hand the execution is also important. Like if I know that through Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Babasaheb Ambedkar, I got this right, but then there is no execution. So that is also like one thing. But so I would say, like, both the things are important, but if there is law, and since something is in the archives, for example Hindu code bill is there, so you cannot hide for long that something from where something is coming from. Okay, but the execution is like in today's time, this is a like era of information. So we all, like, you will get to know from where something is coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today, and I think we can end this session. Thank you again.
Because that is a process of part of the process, that you will get to know from where something is coming from. And in today's time, the brahmanical feminist scholars will also not be able to hide the things, and like they are like talking about Hindu code bill and Ambedkar as a feminist scholar, they are considering in today's time. So that is the, like, they will talk about it. But the execution, but execution is important from state side. And then the literacy about the women's rights, and that change in society, that is also important. For that, work should be done. And yeah.
Excellent. That was just a, good concluding statement, I would say. Uh, we are short of time, and in the interest of time, maybe we can conclude the session now. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Razak, and thank you all for joining. And again, Jai Bhim to all, and thank you. Have a good night.